Today, some of our best segments from the Global Lane. The military junta in Myanmar, also known as Burma, is intensifying its attacks against Christians and other ethnic minorities. Chuck Holton recently witnessed the brutal crackdown, which included airstrikes and artillery assaults on Christian civilians. He brings us this report as he accompanied the Free Burma Rangers into the combat zone.
Deep in the mountains of eastern Burma, gunfire echoes through Christian villages. The Burmese army is driving thousands from their homes as it seeks to crush opposition to the 2021 coup. Rebel armies, though, are slowly liberating village after village.
Right now we are attacking to Loikaw, the capital city of the Karenni state. Before that, the Burma army put in their troops surround that Loikaw because Loikaw is the main command center of all their troops. So we are right now attacking to Loikaw, their main center. So we are pushing them back. So they have to fall back all the time.
For years, the Burmese army has committed atrocities against civilians, deliberately targeting churches and other religious sites. The people living in these villages in the mountains of Burma still live pretty primitive lives. You can tell by the huts that they live in. They're just made of split bamboo. Most of them don't have electricity or running water. And so you might be surprised to find a giant Baptist church built on the top of the hill in this very remote place in the mountains of Burma. But that's because most of these hill tribes are actually Christian. They were converted to Christianity by the very first Baptist missionary, Adoniram Judson, in the end of the 19th century. And that's one of the reasons why there has been this conflict ongoing between them and the Buddhist military junta who controls the country.
This church and this village lost over 100 homes burned and destroyed, and over 100 landmines found, including in the church property, including in the church.
Despite the danger, the NGO called the Free Burma Rangers is using its resources to evacuate civilians and deliver life-saving relief. During the mission, Burmese MiG fighter jets supplied by Russia hunted the group.
So we have a recon plane flying over, trying to find this convoy, I'm pretty sure. We've been going this all day. Normally when they fly, after that will come airstrikes, airplanes. And then these planes can also drop mortars.
Many of the minority groups have taken up arms, resisting the dictatorship for decades. Now, their aging weaponry is no match for the junta's modern arsenal. So this is an M16A1 rifle, and you can tell how old it is by looking at all the bluing is rubbed off of the upper here. And these things were probably left behind at the end of the Vietnam War. That's how old they are. But you can tell, if you look inside here, that the chamber is clean and well oiled. These guys, this is life or death for them, and so they take very good care of their weapons. As the conflict rages, these resilient ethnic groups remain determined to resist military rule, and many believe the goal is finally in reach.
Chuck is back from Burma and joins us with more insights. Chuck, you've been with the Karen and Karenni in Burma on many occasions, and I spent a lot of time with them in Burma and Thailand in the 1990s. They have war, then short periods of peace, then war again. So what has changed for them in the past 30, 35 years? Anything?
Oh, yes, it's changed quite a bit, actually. And actually, this is a completely different war. So in 2021, the Burmese military junta overthrew the democratically elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. And when they did that, then they got this enormous protest movement among your everyday Burmese people who heretofore had not had anything to do with the conflict that was mostly between the Burma army and the hill tribe people in the north. So when the everyday Burmese citizen got involved and started what's called the PDF, People's Defense Forces, what happened was all of these military militias of all the different hill tribes joined the PDF, and they're now united against the Burmese government. The Burmese government cracked down very, very harshly on the people. And that is what started this new phase of the Civil War, which has been going on for more than 70 years.
Well, there are always the naysayers who reject the argument that Christians are singled out. They say the military government is an equal opportunity oppressor, fighting anyone who resists their rule. But I testified before Congress back in '97 and said the Burmese troops destroy Christian churches and leave the Buddhist temples alone when they go into these villages. So what have you learned about these attacks?
That's true. I traveled very extensively throughout Shan State, and I saw a lot of Christian churches. Most of the Christian churches are in Karen and Karenni states. You get into Shan State, you have a lot more Burmese temples. I saw almost every church that I saw was damaged or destroyed. Very, very few that were not. But I only saw one Burmese temple that had been hit with an errant mortar round and that had any damage at all. The rest were completely left alone. So there is a religious component to this that's been much more long-standing than the current civil conflict. It's just that the conflict has expanded to include all the citizens since 2021.
And I know it was very dangerous for you there on the front lines as Burmese fighter jets bombed the area daily. You had to take shelter in a drainage ditch, other places. So what difference did it make being with the Free Burma Rangers and other Christians in that situation?
Well, the Burmese military has a very big price on our heads. And so everywhere we went, we had to be concerned about spies who would give us up to the Burmese military. Pretty much everywhere we went, especially as we got into Shan State, the Free Burma Rangers were being hounded by reconnaissance aircraft from the Burma Army and then fighter jets. So the reconnaissance aircraft would show up, fly around for a couple of hours. If they spotted us, they would call in fighter jets to strike at us. And so whenever we saw the surveillance aircraft overhead, we had to hide our vehicles, hide ourselves, and sometimes sit there for hours under cover until that thing had to fly away to get gas before we could move again.
Okay, Chuck Colton, we're looking forward to your next report on the hospital there. Appreciate your exclusive and enterprising reports from World Hotspots. Stay safe. Thank you, and God bless you. Although recent weather-related disasters have caused climate change activists to warn of pending doom for humanity if we don't alter our behavior, in reality, the human race may face extinction because of a population crisis. People in many countries worldwide aren't having enough babies. Dale Hurd explains.
Empty playgrounds, schools without enough students to stay open, small towns deserted and abandoned. This is not some dystopian vision of the future. Demographers warn this is our future. Global population growth is leveling off, and by the second half of this century could begin to shrink for the first time since the bubonic plague struck the world almost 700 years ago.
Everything that we understand that functions in our societies today that depends on people, which is almost everything, is going to change.
Stephen J. Shaw is a data scientist, demographer, and producer of the film Birth Gap. He spoke to us from his home in Japan, one of the nations at the forefront of this global demographic collapse. Shaw told us he made the documentary mostly out of fear.
Fear of the future that we're, as a planet, completely unprepared for and mostly unaware of.
Taxes could soar as economies shrink. The many elderly could cause retirement and medical systems to collapse. Businesses will struggle to find employees, and there won't be enough young to care for the old.
That means sporadically you're going to have housing that's left desolate, you're going to have stores that are empty, you're going to have places with fewer and fewer employees, fewer customers. You're talking of decimations of communities, you're talking of closed schools, you're talking of closed hospitals.
A nation needs an average fertility rate of 2.1 children per woman to keep its population from shrinking. The countries on this map in some shade of blue all fall below that replacement rate. They include 70% of the global population in almost every developed nation. The U.S. fertility rate hit a new record low last year, dropping to 1.62 births per woman, a number temporarily offset by record numbers of illegal immigrants. In his film, Shaw explains how fewer children from fewer and fewer mothers creates a cascading effect. leading to a downward spiral from which Shaw says no known civilization has ever recovered.
This thing is going to be like a snowball rolling downhill. It's just going to keep building.
Daryl Bricker is global CEO of the polling firm Ipsos Public Affairs and co-author of Empty Planet, The Shock of Global Population Decline.
The top reason for people not having children is they just don't want them. That's the main reason people are not having children. The second reason tends to be related to their ability to have children, whether it's the relationship that they're in or the personal circumstances they find themselves in, or their physical ability to have children.
Shaw calls it unplanned childlessness linked to delayed parenthood.
People trying or wanting to start families well into their 30s, when frankly biology isn't going to help necessarily. Biological challenges start around that time, but there's a bigger problem. Often people looking to start families in the 30s aren't in stable relationships. They've gone through a breakup. They don't have a partner. Their partner's not on the right page at the right time. It doesn't get easier to find that magical moment.
Government incentive programs to encourage larger families have seen only limited success. Shaw warns that nations with the lowest fertility rates could see their populations cut in half in as few as 2 generations.
No society's ever come out of this.
The future doesn't have to look like this, but Shaw said we've got to start talking about it.
Here with more insights on this important subject is CBN News senior correspondent Dale Hurd. Okay, Dale, you end that story saying we've got to start talking about this population crisis. So why aren't we talking about it?
Good question. I think we've been brainwashed. We've heard our whole lives about the population bomb, that more people is a problem, when in fact it's not the problem. We know that more people means more solutions to problems, more creativity, more wealth. People create wealth. But we've had this hammered into us that more people is bad, and I just don't think people are used to the whole idea that the population is going to shrink.
On your map, in addition to Japan, you show China highlighted in blue. So tell us more about what's happening in China. I always thought it was the most populous country in the world, but not enough people?
I just have to say to the Chinese Communist Party, mission accomplished. Okay, they told their nation that you only need 1 child, if that. And guess what? It worked. And now China is facing a demographic nightmare in which in 15 years, China could have more elderly people than the entire U.S. population, 400 million. China is going to age into irrelevance before it becomes a superpower. This will not be the Chinese century, because you have young people, they've had this message hammered into them against children, against family, and guess what? They're not interested in children and they're not interested in family.
Is it true that North Koreans are having more babies than South Koreans?
Yes, and North Korea is only half the size, half the population of South Korea, so I don't know that they're going to outpopulate South Korea, but South Korea is their replacement rate or their birth rate is at 0.8, which is one of the lowest in the world, and North Korea's is double that. Now, what does that tell us? That it's not about economics, and it might not even be about the political stresses in your environment. It's a choice, and the South Koreans are choosing to not have children.
You and I have reported extensively about the effect of mass immigration on Europe, also right here in the U.S. So is immigration a good thing to save countries like the United States from going extinct?
No, you're changing the population. And I should add, which I did not include in this story, but could have, that, I mean, there are movements in Christian circles, in Jewish circles, to have more children. And that's great. But that's not going to be enough to change significantly the problem, for instance, in the United States, where we're below the replacement rate. But you need a societal turn in the attitude toward children, and that's just not there yet.
Well, economic concerns, right, about not having children, but what about abortion? Today here in this country, you can get a pill delivered in the mail. You can risk your health by aborting your baby at home. So what role does abortion play in all of this, Dale?
You know, it's the most tragic and most graphic expression of the issue, which is, as one of my experts said, people simply don't want to have children. Enough people don't want to have children, and that's why they're not having them. You know, a missionary in France, in talking about the problem there with the birth rate, he said it was hedonism. People don't want to sacrifice this or that, a house or a car or a career, for children. It's a choice they make, and we will pay the price for it. Our children especially, and our grandchildren will pay the price.
Yeah, all you have to do is go to the book of Genesis repeatedly, be fruitful and multiply. That's God's plan, be fruitful and multiply. So what can governments do beyond financial incentives?
Not a whole lot. And you know, financial incentives maybe have been oversold, because even in Hungary, which has amazing incentives for increased numbers of children and families, they're still below replacement level. And so you really can't make people do what they don't want to do.
Okay, Dale Hurd, thought-provoking information there. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Sure.
In this election year, China is likely to be a hot topic of political debate. Is President Xi Jinping and members of his Communist Party friendly competitors or enemies of the West? Our next guest contends the CCP is killing Americans and destroying our way of life without firing a shot. Peter Schweizer, president of the Government Accountability Institute, is author of the new book, Blood Money: Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. Peter, congratulations on another #1 bestseller. And I know 2 years ago you gave us a New York Times bestseller with Red Handed, which exposed how American elites get rich helping China. With Blood Money, you dig a little deeper. You contend the United States is already in a hot war with China. Our leaders are passive about it. Explain what's happening and why.
Yeah, I mean, China has a strategy. They call it disintegration warfare that says, look, we don't want to have a kinetic fighting war with the United States because that would lead to all kinds of disruption and damage in China. So we're going to try to beat them by not going to war, but by undermining them nonetheless. It's an idea as old as Sun Tzu, the strategist, who said the best strategist is the one who defeats his enemy without actually having to fight him. They're doing this by sowing social chaos in the United States. They're literally killing Americans with fentanyl. The Mexican cartels are the junior partners. This is a Chinese operation. And they are engaging in other activities that are designed to tear America apart. And it seems to be working.
Well, let's get into this with a look at some of our politicians from both parties. Let's begin with President Biden. I know for at least 5 years now you've conducted extensive research on Biden family connections to China. The president says he's had no involvement in his son Hunter's business, but you contend he has profited. How?
He's profited because his family's profited. And we need to remember that the bribery and corruption statutes in the United States say even if the actual politician doesn't get a dime, if his family member profits, that in and of itself is corruption. And that's what's happened in this case. When you look at an issue like fentanyl, Joe Biden will not confront China on this issue. He said there will be no finger pointing. I think the reason is because of these financial connections. A Chinese gang called UBG is responsible for setting up the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico and making them the kings of fentanyl. They send more of this poison into the United States than anyone. The head of this Chinese gang is a gentleman who goes by the name White Wolf. Zhang An Li is his name. White Wolf has a business partner who gave the Bidens in 2017 a $5 million forgivable loan that the Bidens have never repaid. So you literally have 1 degree of separation between the first family of the United States and this poisonous fentanyl trade. Joe Biden does not want to have a conversation about this because of those entanglements and how poorly it would reflect on his family.
Well, who else? How about the vice president, members of Congress?
Yeah, well, you could look on the Republican side, Senator Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is sort of DOA on these issues as well. He'll say some tough things about China, but he won't actually do anything. And the reason is that his wife, Elaine Chao, her family owns a shipping business called Foremost Shipping. that has essentially been set up by the Chinese government to grow and expand rapidly. They've worked together since the early 1990s. What that means, of course, is that the families become wealthy, but it also means that if Mitch McConnell as a senator were to do or say something that particularly angered Beijing, they could destroy the family shipping business overnight. That's the kind of leverage they have and the kind of leverage that they use.
And what percentage of Congress are we talking here that they have leverage over?
I think there's a handful of people. The larger issue, I think, is more a reflection of D.C.'s political culture, and that is we have a lot of national leaders who want to be there. They're kind of go along to get along. Once you realize what China is doing and you look at the facts of how they are killing Americans, really over the last 5 years that they're responsible for the deaths of several million Americans. Once you confront that reality, you can't have business as usual with China. That means making very hard and difficult choices. So some of our leaders are engaging in what Winston Churchill calls looking at our enemies with vacant eyes. They kind of know what's going on, but they don't want to confront the reality because it would make their jobs much, much more difficult.
How about Donald Trump? Now, some people say he's also profiting from business with the Chinese. What did you find?
Yeah, Donald Trump doesn't have any direct financial ties to China, and he's actually, when he was president, was pretty tough on China. I think the one note of caution there is that, you know, Donald Trump probably overestimates the ability of his personal diplomacy to get results.
Okay, the book is Blood Money: Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. Another New York Times #1. Peter Schweizer, thank you for sharing those alarming insights with us. God bless you.
God bless you, too.
Persecution, wars, and rumors of wars, signs in the heavens, open borders, and crime. It sure seems like we're on the precipice of a major world-changing event, something bigger than the pandemic. Are you anxious, distraught? Keep praying. God is in control, and keep your mind and heart focused on Him. If you know Him, then you know He has a plan. He's got this, and you. Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on the CBN News and NRB channels, YouTube, Spotify, and our broadcast affiliates. And until next time, be blessed.